Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it's a great pleasure to rise and physically in the chamber to discuss the Environment Bill, a topic which the Select Committee that I am privileged to chair considered in pre-legislative scrutiny. So I share the pleasure of the Minister and the House that at last this bill is on the point of concluding its passage through the House. I'm going to confine my remarks to Lord's Amendment 45 and Government Amendment A to that amendment. And I do so because the origins for much of the work, as the Minister has been very generous to admit, from the government amendments proposed in Amendment 45 stem from the private member's bill that I was very fortunate to be able to introduce to this House before COVID struck, but as a consequence of the pandemic and the impact it had on the parliamentary schedule, this is the first opportunity I've had since February 2020 to discuss the subject of that bill, because we never got to second reading. And therefore, it is of immense pleasure that I have seen many of the points that have been raised by me, the support I had from across the House. I think 135 MPs were kind enough to express support to the campaign which NGOs got together to support my bill, and the support of about 20 different campaigning groups who were helping to craft the bill and to gain support from members of the public. We had, I think, close to 95,000 people at the most recent count, but at the time of the bill, it was about 45,000 people expressed support for it. I think one of the things that happened during COVID was the enforced extra leisure use that people up and down the country had. The Honourable Member who speaks for the Opposition described his own joy of wild swimming. I think that was a newfound joy for many people, including members of my family during the course of lockdown, finding the rivers and waterways of our country a suitable place for recreation, and one that they would have not expected to have been as adversely polluted as they have from many factors, but in particular from sewage over the past decade or so. And I didn't come into politics to stand up and talk about crap. And I'm not going to talk use that word again, but I find myself having become something of an expert on dealing with effluent, human effluent in this country. It's not a particularly comfortable place for me. I don't want to have to do it for the rest of my life. But at the moment, I'm finding that there is a great deal of interest inside and outside this place on how do we ensure that we do not treat the arteries of nature, which is what our rivers are, as the cesspit of humanity. And the measures that the Minister has taken up with alacrity from my bill are all moving in the right direction to take steps to reduce the discharge of sewage into our rivers and thence into our oceans. And I'd like to start my specific remarks by paying tribute to the Minister for the work that she has done in picking up my bill, persuading her officials that this is something that was important to her, and therefore making progress when the bill got to the Lords in the way that she has described to us this evening. She wanted to support my private member's bill when it was first introduced, but at that point in the parliamentary cycle, we were looking at, I think, a legislative load for DEFRA of unprecedented scale. They had the Agriculture Bill, the Fisheries Bill, the Environment Bill, and all the Brexit statutory instrument legislation, and said that that was a reason why they couldn't, at that time, get behind my bill. And the Minister has personally delivered these changes, and I want to acknowledge that and thank her for doing so. Equally, I'd like to put on record my thanks to members of the other place who have also grappled with this issue closely, and in particular the Duke of Wellington. And I'm very pleased to be able to tell the Chamber that it is the Duke of Wellington, not the Duke of Westminster, as he's frequently referred to in that place in these debates, who picked up the primary sub-clause of my private member's bill, the duty on water companies, on the face of the bill, not to discharge sewage and to progressively reduce harm and improve the sewerage system. And that is the amendment that he has put before the House and the Lords decided to bring back to this House. Now, I accept, having discussed this at considerable length with him and with the Minister, that that amendment is not perfect. There are things that could be done to improve it, but it does reflect the core of my private member's bill, which is not included within Amendment 45. And although Amendment 45 includes everything else I agree with, and I will vote for it when it comes to a vote on that stand part amendment, but I am not in a position to vote for the Government A amendment to Clause 45 for the reasons that I think were quite well expressed by others in the House already, that we do need to ensure that water companies feel that the statute is there to compel them to pay attention to this issue. And the water management plans, which I think are a very good idea, do not have statutory force and could be changed, and under another minister, I don't think this minister would do anything other than bear down on water companies on this issue, but it may have less priority in the future. I give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. But is there a possible compromise in that the Minister was saying that the regulator could set targets and could enforce targets, and the regulator can obviously extract penalties? Would that be a way forward? Could we get the Minister to come up with some tough regulatory targets that fall short of the absolute guarantee of the legal statement?
Well, I'm very grateful for my right honourable friend. I think there will be targets. There are targets in the bill anyway for water quality. There is also the guidance that the Minister referred to, which she's on the point of finalising for the next pricing review period for Ofwat, and my committee, the Environmental Audit Committee, is currently doing an inquiry into water quality, and we will be making some recommendations to strengthen that guidance. So I think there are tools that can be used, but it doesn't get away from the fact that there needs to be some primary legislative duty on water companies, in my view, in order to persuade them to treat this with sufficient seriousness. Comments have been made about what this will cost, quite reasonably. My right honourable friend asked that question as well. But our committee had evidence from Thames Water last week. Thames Water, as many people who live in London will be aware, are currently investing in the largest capital programme in treatment works that we've had in our lifetime. I think it's a £4.6 billion investment, and that has been paid for. The purpose of that investment is to take away 37 million tonnes of sewage spilt into the Thames legally, out of a total of 39 million tonnes by Thames. So it's going to have a huge impact on reducing the amount of sewage legally spilt into the Thames. The cost will be an increase of £19 per household in household bills for the water rates payers of Thames Water in London. And I think that illustrates quite well that although the costs of improving the network are going to be significant, huge. The Minister gave a range which is even bigger than the amount that's been spent in combating COVID by the government. This will take decades. The Secretary of State, when appearing before our committee, not in this inquiry but last year, when we asked him about this issue, acknowledged that we will not deal with the problem of exceptional spillages out of water treatment plants until such time as the drainage system separates completely surface water from foul water. There's something like 200,000 kilometres of combined sewers which are underneath our streets and our fields. And while they are combined, it provides the opportunity for water treatment plants to be overwhelmed with excessive rainfall. And the point that was made by the spokesman of the opposition, that this is meant to happen on an exceptional basis, it absolutely is happening routinely, and that's the information that we've discovered from the government's pressure on the water companies to introduce early event duration monitors, which they have now done across almost all of the network, and that is what is giving rise to the information that the Guardian is being able to collate, which shows that there's a completely unacceptable routine spillage of sewage into our rivers, and that has got to stop. And that is what was behind my bill. It is the reason why I continue to talk about this subject ad nauseam, and I'm much looking forward to the day when this bill will receive royal assent and I'll be able to get on to other matters. Thank you.